My brother mocked me for not handling his legal issues, saying, "You're just a struggling pub defender." Until I revealed that I'm the partner in the law firm representing his ex-wife. His smirk vanished. The text message from my brother made my stomach clench. "Can't wait to hear about all your pro bono cases defending criminals, sis. Maybe you'll finally admit law school was wasted on you. I'm Eliana, and my little brother has always had a talent for getting under my skin." The family reunion invitation sat on my granite countertop like a ticking time bomb. Mom's elegant handwriting promising an evening of family bonding and celebration. What it should have said was passive-aggressive comments and judgment. "You could always cancel," Braden suggested, sliding a fresh coffee across my desk. My colleague and closest friend at the firm had endured years of my family drama stories. And give Adrian the satisfaction? Never. I took a sip of the coffee, savoring its bitter warmth. "Besides, Mom would never forgive me." "You could just tell them the truth," he said, leaning against my office doorframe. "Partner at Thompson, Campbell and Associates isn't exactly something to be ashamed of." I shook my head, watching the city lights flicker to life outside my corner office window. "They think I'm still a public defender because that's what Adrian tells everyone. He's convinced himself that's all I'll ever be." The truth was more complicated. Yes, I'd started as a public defender, and I was damn proud of that work. But 5 years ago, Reese Campbell had seen something in me during a high-profile case. Now, at 35, I was the youngest partner in the firm's history. Not that my family knew any of this. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, this time, honey, please try to keep the peace tomorrow. Your brother's going through a lot right now." "Going through a lot?" I scoffed, showing Braden the message. "He's going through a divorce because he couldn't keep his hands off his secretary. That's hardly a tragedy. Speaking of which," Braden's expression turned serious. "Have you heard who's handling his wife's case?" Before I could answer, my assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Miss Sutton, your mother's here." Mom swept into my office like a perfectly coiffed hurricane, her designer handbag swinging. "Eliana, darling, I thought we could have lunch before tomorrow's party." I watched Braden make a strategic retreat, mouthing good luck as he disappeared. "Mom, I'm working. You can't just show up." "In that tiny public defender's office you're always talking about?" She glanced around my obviously luxurious office with confusion. "This seems different." "I'm covering for a friend," I lied smoothly, the same excuse I'd used for years. "What's really going on?" She sank into one of my client chairs, her perfectly maintained facade cracking slightly. "It's your brother. This divorce, it's going to be ugly. Natasha's hired some high-powered firm." "Has she?" I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. "Thompson, Campbell something or other? They're sharks, apparently." Mom wrung her hands. "Adrian's beside himself. He says they'll take everything." I bit back a laugh, if she only knew. "Maybe he should have thought about that before sleeping with his 24-year-old secretary," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Eliana, he made a mistake." "We all make mistakes." She reached across my desk, patting my hand. "Just be gentle with him tomorrow. He's been saying some things about you, I know, but he's hurting." The irony was almost too much to bear. Tomorrow night, at our family reunion, Adrian would undoubtedly mock my career choices again. He'd make snide comments about public defenders and wasted potential, completely unaware that on Monday morning, I'd be sitting across from him in a conference room as opposing counsel's partner. "I'll behave if he does," I promised, knowing full well what was coming. Mom stood, smoothing her designer dress. "That's all I ask, and darling, maybe wear something a little more professional tomorrow? That navy suit you used to have was nice." I glanced down at my Armani pantsuit and Louis Vuitton heels, easily worth more than what Adrian made in a month. "I'll see what I can find." After she left, I pulled up Adrian's divorce file on my computer. There it was in black and white. Natasha Evans versus Adrian Sutton. Primary counsel, Reese Campbell. Partner in charge, Eliana Sutton. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Adrian. "Hope you're ready for tomorrow, sis. Brought some big news to share. Time to show everyone what real success looks like." I smiled, thinking about Monday morning's meeting. "Oh, Adrian," I whispered to my empty office. "You have no idea. 5 years earlier, I sat across from Reese Campbell in a cramped courthouse hallway, my public defender's badge feeling like a target on my chest. You made quite an impression in there," she said, studying me with sharp eyes. Not many lawyers would have caught that inconsistency in the prosecution's evidence. I clutched my worn briefcase tighter. "Just doing my job. Your job." Reese laughed. "You dismantled the DA's entire case. My client was ready to plead guilty until you proved his innocence. That case had been my breakthrough. A young man wrongly accused of armed robbery, his life hanging by a thread. I'd spent weeks piecing together security footage, proving he'd been across town when the crime occurred. I believe in being thorough, I said, standing to leave. Wait. Reese handed me her business card. Come see me next week. I think you're wasting your talent here. That memory played through my mind as I walked into the family reunion, fashionably late. The country club's banquet room buzzed with conversation, crystal glasses clinking as relatives mingled. There's my favorite failure. Adrian's voice boomed across the room. He was already 3 drinks in, his designer suit slightly rumpled. Still saving the world one criminal at a time? Adrienne. I nodded coolly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. You know, he continued, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear, I just closed a 7-figure deal last week. Meanwhile, my big sister's probably still making, what, $40 a year? Our cousin, Maria, winced. Adrian, maybe we should know. No, let's hear about Eliana's noble sacrifice. He interrupted. Tell us, sis, how many drug dealers did you keep out of jail this month? I took a deliberate sip of champagne. Actually, I've moved on from criminal defense. Oh? His eyebrows shot up. Finally admitted defeat? Before I could respond, Mom appeared between us. Children, please. Adrian, honey. Maybe you should slow down on the drinks. I'm celebrating, Mom. He threw an arm around her shoulders. Did you tell her my news? About the merger? I was just about to, Mom said, shooting me a warning look. Adrian's company is merging with a commotion near the entrance cut her off. Heads turned as Braden burst into the room, tablet in hand. He caught my eye and gestured urgently. Excuse me, I murmured, extracting myself from the family circle. In the hallway, Braden thrust the tablet at me. You need to see this. The headline made my blood run cold. Tech CEO Adrian Sutton's divorce takes ugly turn, insider trading allegations surface. It just broke, Braden said quietly. Natasha's claiming she has evidence he was trading on non-public information. Through the banquet room doors I could hear Adrian's loud laughter. The merger's going to make us millions to success. This changes everything, I said, scanning the article. If these allegations are true, that's not all. Braden swiped to another page. Look who's representing him. Jesus Thompson's name jumped out at me. The same Jesus Thompson who tried to poach my biggest client last year, who dismissed me as that public defender playing at corporate law. Perfect, I muttered. Just perfect. My phone vibrated, Reese calling. I answered on the first ring. Tell me you've seen the news, she said without preamble. I'm looking at it now. The insider trading allegations change everything, she finished. Listen, Eliana. I know he's your brother, but this case just got a lot bigger. If you want to recuse yourself, no. My voice was firm. I'm staying on. Through the doors I could hear Adrienne holding court. My sister? Oh, she means well. But some people just aren't cut out for the big leagues. Public defenders are important, I guess. But let's be honest. It's where lawyers go when they can't hack it in the real world. Braden touched my arm. You okay? I handed him back the tablet, straightening my shoulders. You know what the funny thing is? 5 years ago, when Reese offered me the job, Adrian told me I'd never survive in corporate law, said I didn't have the killer instinct. And now he's about to find out just how wrong he was. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom. Monday morning's meeting should be interesting. Speaking of which, Braden grinned. What are you going to wear? Something expensive, I said, pushing open the banquet room doors. Very, very expensive. Adrienne's voice carried across the room. To my incredible success, and to my sister. Bless her heart. Still fighting the good fight in her little public defender's office. I raised my glass in his direction, smiling. In less than hours, his world would implode, and I would be there to watch it happen. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I stood in the courthouse adjusting my crimson Chanel suit while Reese reviewed our notes one final time. The Morrison case is straightforward, she said. Just don't let opposing counsel rattle you. I smiled, thinking of the much bigger confrontation looming later that day. When do they ever? The courtroom doors opened, and I strode in with the confidence that came from years of victories. 2 hours later, the judge's gavel fell with a satisfying crack. Motion granted in favor of the plaintiff, she announced. Outside the courtroom, Reese squeezed my shoulder. Brilliant work. Now, are you ready for this afternoon? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Adrienne's name flashed on the screen along with a text, meeting with my hotshot lawyers today. Gonna crush this divorce thing. Wish you had the skills to see a real lawyer in action. Oh, I'll have a front row seat, I muttered. Miss Sutton? Our assistant appeared looking nervous. Natasha Evans is here for your 11 o'clock. I found Natasha waiting in my office, perfectly put together in designer clothes that Adrian had probably bought her. She stood when I entered, extending her hand. I had no idea you were. She gestured vaguely. Adrian always said that I was a struggling public defender? I finished, gesturing for her to sit. Yes. He likes that story. I'm sorry, she said quietly. If I'd known you were his sister, I wouldn't have. Stop. I held up a hand. You hired this firm because we're the best. My relationship with Adrian doesn't change that, Reese entered, carrying a thick file. Let's talk about these insider trading allegations. Natasha's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. I found the emails 3 months ago. He was using information from board meetings to tip off investors. The merger. It's not what everyone thinks. Does he know you have this evidence? I asked. No. She pulled out her phone, showing us a series of screenshots. He thinks I'm just after the money. He has no idea that he could go to prison, Reese finished. My stomach twisted. As much as Adrian deserved to be taken down a peg, this was serious. Have you shown these to anyone else? Just my friend at the SEC, Natasha said. She's the one who told me to get a lawyer. A knock interrupted us. Braden poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, but Jesus Thompson is here. He's early for the 2 o'clock and making a scene in reception. Of course he is, I muttered. Natasha, would you excuse us? In the reception area, Jesus Thompson stood in an expensive Italian suit, radiating arrogance. Where's Campbell? I'm not dealing with associates today. Actually, I stepped forward. You'll be dealing with me. He looked me up and down dismissively. And you are? Eliana Sutton, managing partner for this case. His eyes narrowed. Sutton, any relation to the client you're representing? Yes. I smiled coldly. Shall we move this to the conference room? Jesus's face reddened. This is a conflict of interest. I'll have you disbarred. You'll do nothing of the sort, Reese said, appearing beside me. We've already cleared it with the ethics board. Now shall we discuss the terms of your client's surrender, or would you like to continue making threats? The elevator dinged. Adrian stepped out, his usual smirk freezing when he saw me. Eliana? He looked between me and Jesus. What are you doing here? Working? I said simply. Conference room 3 is this way. Adrian grabbed Jesus's arm. What's going on? Why is my sister here? Because, I turned to face him fully, I'm the partner handling your wife's divorce case. Surprise. The color drained from his face. But you're a public defender. No, Adrian. I'm the lawyer you always claimed I couldn't be. I gestured to the conference room. Now, let's discuss those insider trading allegations. Shall we? What allegations? He stumbled slightly. This is ridiculous. Jesus, do something. Yeah. Actually, Reese interjected. Perhaps we should start with the evidence Natasha provided. The emails make for fascinating reading. Adrian's swagger evaporated. Emails? What emails? I opened the conference room door, enjoying the way his hand shook as he reached for his phone. All will be explained. Please take a seat. Mom's going to hear about this, he threatened weakly. Oh, I'm counting on it. I placed the thick folder on the table. Now about those stock trades you made last quarter. The door closed behind us with a soft click, and for the first time in our lives, Adrian looked at me with something new in his eyes. Fear. You can't do this to me. Adrian's voice cracked as he paced my office later that evening. I'm your brother. Exactly. My brother who spent years mocking my career choices. I remained seated behind my desk, watching him unravel. How does it feel to know your struggling public defender sister holds your future in her hands? Mom called me 6 times during that meeting, he said, running his hands through his hair. What am I supposed to tell her? The truth might be refreshing. The door opened and Braden entered with 2 cups of coffee, stopping short when he saw Adrian. Sorry, I didn't realize. No. Stay, I said, accepting the coffee. Adrian was just leaving. This isn't over, Adrian snapped, storming out. Braden settled into the chair across from me. That went well. He didn't even acknowledge the insider trading evidence, I said, rubbing my temples. Just kept sputtering about betrayal and family loyalty. Speaking of family, Braden nodded toward my phone, which was lighting up with another call from Mom. I answered on speaker. Hi, Mom. Eliana Marie Sutton. Her voice filled the office. How could you ambush your brother like this? He's devastated. Devastated that he got caught, I corrected. Did he tell you about the illegal stock trades? That's just business, she faltered. You don't understand how these things work. Actually, Mom, I understand perfectly. It's literally my job to understand. A job you never told us about? She paused, and I could picture her pacing her kitchen. All these years letting us think, why didn't you tell us? Would it have mattered? Adrian made sure everyone saw me as a failure. You never questioned his version of events. That's not fair, no. What's not fair is watching my brother commit securities fraud while mocking my career choices. I caught Braden's supportive nod. The evidence is solid, Mom. He's in serious trouble, then help him. You're his sister. I'm also an officer of the court. What he did was illegal. The line went quiet for a moment. Your father would be so disappointed in you. The words hit like a physical blow. Braden reached across the desk, but I waved him off. Dad taught us about integrity, I said quietly, about doing what's right even when it's hard. I wonder what he'd think about Adrian's choices. She hung up without responding. You okay? Braden asked. Before I could answer, my assistant Sarah buzzed in. Miss Sutton, Natasha Evans is here again. She says it's urgent. Natasha burst in before I could respond, clutching her phone. He's threatening to expose my past. Says if I don't drop the case, he'll tell everyone about my DUI from college. Let me see, I said, taking her phone. Adrian's text messages were a desperate mix of threats and pleading. Drop the case, or everyone learns about your mistake. Think about your reputation. I'll destroy you. Classic Adrian, I muttered, always attacking when he's cornered. Can he do this? Natasha's hands trembled. No, I said firmly. This is witness intimidation. We can add it to the pile. My phone buzzed again. Jesus Thompson calling. I put it on speaker. Your brother's willing to deal, he said without preamble. Full financial settlement. Natasha gets what she wants. We just need the insider trading evidence destroyed. That's not happening, I replied. The SEC is already involved. Think about your family, Eliana. Once this goes public, are you actually suggesting I commit a felony to help cover up another felony? I interrupted. Careful, Jesus. That could get us both disbarred. He hung up with a curse. Braden leaned forward. What's your play here? I looked at Natasha, then back at the mounting evidence on my desk. We push forward. Adrian needs to learn actions have consequences. He'll never forgive you, Natasha said softly, maybe. But I'll never forgive myself if I let him continue thinking he's above the law. My phone lit up with another text from Adrian. Final chance, sis. Back off or this gets ugly. You're not the only one with secrets. I showed it to Braden, who whistled low. He's desperate. Good, I said, reaching for my briefcase. That means we're winning. Where are you going? Natasha asked. To see my mother. I stood straightening my jacket. It's time she learned who her children really are. As I headed for the elevator, Braden called after me. What if Adrian's right? What if this destroys your family? I turned back, thinking of all the years of mockery, the dismissive comments, the constant belittling of my choices. Some things, I said quietly, need to be destroyed before they can be rebuilt. The elevator doors closed, and I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Adrian had always accused me of lacking killer instinct. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been. The pre-settlement conference room felt like a pressure cooker. Adrian sat across the table, flanked by Jesus and another attorney I didn't recognize. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by dark circles under his eyes, and a slightly rumpled collar. Before we begin, Jesus announced, my client has prepared a statement. Save it. Reese cut in. We're here to discuss numbers and criminal liability. Adrian's head snapped up. Criminal liability? This is a divorce settlement. It was, I said, sliding a folder across the table. Until we found these. The new attorney, a nervous-looking man named Paul, opened the folder and blanched. Mr. Thompson, a word? They huddled in whispered conversation while Adrian stared at me, his face a mix of anger and fear. What did you give them? Everything. Natasha answered from beside me. The emails, the phone records, the offshore accounts. You vindictive bit. Choose your next words carefully, I interrupted. They're being recorded. Jesus returned to the table, his confidence visibly shaken. We need to discuss parameters. Parameters? Reese laughed. Your client committed securities fraud. The SEC has been notified. The only parameters we're discussing are how much prison time he's facing. Prison? Adrian's voice cracked. Eliana, you can't be serious. We're family. Funny how you only remember that when you need something. The door opened and my assistant entered with a note. I read it and felt my stomach drop. Mom's in the lobby, I announced. She's demanding to be let in. Adrian's face lit up with hope. Yes, let her in. She'll talk sense into you. I nodded to my assistant. And moments later, Mom swept in wearing her best fixing things outfit. This has gone far enough, she declared. Eliana, you're dropping this case immediately. Actually, Reese interjected, she's not. And who are you two? I'm the founding partner of this firm, Reese stood, and your daughter is one of our most valuable partners. She's not going anywhere. Mom's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. Partner. Surprise, I said dryly. Turns out the struggling public defender did okay for herself. But Mom sank into an empty chair. All this time, I confirmed, I let Adrian spin his little narrative because it was easier than fighting it. But now, I turned to my brother. Now you've crossed a line that family can't fix. The SEC will be here in minutes, Reese added. Last chance for a deal. Jesus leaned over to whisper in Adrian's ear. My brother's face went through a rapid series of emotions before settling on defeat. What are your terms? He asked quietly. Full financial disclosure, I began. Natasha gets 70% of all assets. You admit to the insider trading, cooperate with the SEC investigation, and take whatever plea deal they offer. That's insane, Mom protested. Adrienne, don't you dare. Mom. Adrienne's voice was hollow. Stop. She has everything. The emails, the trades, the shell companies. She has it all, but she's your sister. She can't testify against you. That's spousal privilege, Mom, I corrected. Siblings can absolutely testify against each other, and I will. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, Adrian reached for the settlement papers with a shaking hand. You've won, he said, not meeting my eyes. You've finally proven you're better than me. Happy? This was never about being better than you, I replied. It was about being better than what you thought I was. He signed the papers without another word. Mom started crying quietly. The SEC agents will want to speak with you next, Reese informed him. I suggest you cooperate fully. It might mean the difference between 5 years 10. Adrian stood on unsteady legs. I need some air before they arrive. Don't even think about running, Jesus warned. It'll only make things worse. As Adrian headed for the door, he paused beside my chair. For what it's worth, he said softly, I was wrong about you. You're not just a killer lawyer. You're ruthless. No, I corrected him. I'm just not afraid of you anymore. He nodded once and left. Mom followed, pausing only to say, I hope this was worth destroying our family. After they were gone, Natasha touched my arm. Thank you for everything. I watched through the conference room windows as Adrian waited by the elevators, shoulders slumped, his whole world crumbling around him. The brother who had tormented me for years now looked small and broken. You okay? Reese asked quietly. Ask me again when this is over, I replied, gathering my papers. The SEC will be here soon. Let's finish this. The elevator dinged, and I watched Adrian step inside, disappearing behind closing doors. It felt like the end of something, but also, maybe, the beginning of something else. Something true. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Tech CEO faces securities fraud charges splashed across every financial website, accompanied by Adrian's corporate headshot. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Your brother's asking to see you, Braden said, appearing in my doorway. He's in the building's lobby. I found Adrian sitting alone on a leather bench, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His designer suit was replaced by khakis and a wrinkled polo shirt. They froze my accounts, he said without looking up. All of them. That's standard procedure in fraud cases. Jesus dropped me as a client. He laughed bitterly. Said I'm too toxic now. Mom's not answering my calls. Even my doorman looked at me differently this morning. What do you want, Adrian? He finally met my eyes. Help me fix this. It's too late for that. Is it? He stood, desperation clear in his voice. You're the best lawyer I know. Yes. I can admit that now. There has to be something. The only thing left is to cooperate fully and hope for leniency. I crossed my arms. The evidence is overwhelming. Because my wife betrayed me, because my sister, because you broke the law. I cut him off repeatedly and deliberately. This isn't about betrayal. It's about consequences. The lobby security guard was watching us nervously. Adrian noticed and deflated slightly. You know what the worst part is? He said quietly. All those years I spent mocking you, you were becoming everything I pretended to be. Successful, respected, powerful. You didn't just mock me, Adrienne. You actively tried to diminish me. Every family gathering, every holiday, every chance you got because I was jealous. The words exploded out of him, echoing through the lobby. You were always the smart one, the driven one, Dad's favorite. Dad's been gone for 15 years. Nah. And you're still trying to make him proud while he gestured vaguely at himself. The elevator dinged and Reese stepped out, followed by 2 SEC agents I recognized from yesterday's interviews. Mr. Sutton, one of them called, we have some follow-up questions. Adrienne's shoulders slumped. I suppose this is karma. No, I said. This is justice, there's a difference. Miss Sutton, the other agent, nodded to me. We'll need to speak with you as well. Of course. I turned back to Adrian. Get a good criminal defense attorney. Not a flashy one, a competent one. I can recommend several. You're still looking out for me, he said wonderingly. After everything. You're still my brother. That doesn't mean I'll save you from your own choices. The agents led Adrian toward a conference room, but he paused at the door. Hey, Eliana, remember when we were kids and I pushed you off your bike? You said I'd never learn to ride it anyway, but you did. The next day, you got right back on. I should have known then that you'd always prove me wrong. The conference room door closed behind him, and Reese appeared at my side. Your mother's giving interviews, she said softly, claiming you manipulated the evidence to destroy your brother. Of course she is. I checked my phone, 5 missed calls from Mom and a text. How could you do this to our family? The partners want to release a statement. Reese continued. Show our support for you. No. I watched through the glass as Adrian slumped in his chair answering the agent's questions. Let the evidence speak for itself. My phone buzzed again. Natasha this time. Just saw the news, are you okay? Before I could respond, the elevator opened and Jesus Thompson strode out heading straight for me. You've made a powerful enemy, he growled. Threatening opposing counsel? I raised an eyebrow. That's a bold choice for someone facing potential conspiracy charges. His face reddened. I had no knowledge of Save It for the Ethics Board, Reese interrupted. I believe they're very interested in your involvement. Jesus stormed off, nearly colliding with Braden, who was approaching with coffee. Your mom's on line 1, he said, handing me a cup. Again, let it ring. I watched Adrian through the conference room window, remembering all the times he'd torn me down, all the years of subtle and not so subtle jabs. Was it worth it? Braden asked quietly. In the conference room, Adrian buried his face in his hands as the agents presented more evidence. Through the glass, I could see his shoulders shaking. Ask me in 10 years, I replied, turning away from the window. Right now, I have work to do. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from Mom. Your father would be ashamed. I typed back 3 words before silencing my phone. No, he wouldn't. Then I straightened my jacket and headed back to my office, leaving my brother to face the consequences of his choices just as I had faced mine all those years ago. The courtroom fell silent as I approached the podium. Adrian sat at the defendant's table, his new attorney, a competent, no-nonsense woman named Rachel, beside him. 3 months had passed since the scandal broke, and today would determine his fate. Your Honor, I began, I'm here today not as the defendant's sister, but as counsel for Natasha Evans, whose divorce settlement is intrinsically linked to these criminal proceedings. The judge nodded. Proceed, Miss Sutton. The evidence before you shows a clear pattern of securities fraud spanning 3 years. I gestured to the exhibits displayed on the courtroom screens. Mr. Sutton didn't just break the law, he built his entire business model around breaking it. Adrian wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom sat in the back row, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. The defense claims these were isolated incidents, I continued. Mistakes made under pressure, the evidence tells a different story. Rachel stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is editorializing. Overruled. Continue, Miss Sutton. I pulled up the email chain that had started everything. This exchange from March clearly shows premeditation. Quote, the board doesn't know yet. Buy now before the announcement. Delete this email. Adrian flinched. In the gallery, I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath. The prosecution has already established criminal liability, I said. I'm here to ensure that the civil penalties reflect the scope of the damage. My client's entire marriage was built on fraudulent gains. Your Honor, Rachel interrupted. Miss Sutton's personal relationship with the defendant creates an obvious conflict, which was reviewed and approved by the Ethics Board, I countered. My relationship with the defendant gives me unique insight into the pattern of deception. The judge leaned forward. Are you prepared to testify to that effect, Miss Sutton? I am. I turned to face Adrian directly. For years I watched my brother manipulate facts to serve his narrative. He convinced our entire family I was a failure while he committed federal crimes. The pattern is clear. Objection. Rachel stood again. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. The judge frowned. Stay on point, Miss Sutton. I nodded, pulling up the financial records. The defendant's actions resulted in over $12 million in fraudulent gains. The proposed settlement of 70% to Miss Evans is more than fair. It represents only the legitimate portions of their joint assets. Adrian whispered something to Rachel, who shook her head sharply. Furthermore, I continued, we ask the court to consider these civil penalties in conjunction with the criminal charges. Mr. Sutton's cooperation, while late, has been helpful in identifying other participants in the scheme. Jesus Thompson, sitting in the back near Mom, shifted uncomfortably. The SEC's investigation is ongoing, I concluded, but the damage to innocent investors is clear. We ask the court to approve the settlement as structured. The judge reviewed her notes. Miss Rachel, your response? Adrian's attorney rose. Your Honor, while we don't contest the basic facts, we believe Miss Sutton's personal vendetta. Objection, Reese called from our table. Sustained, the judge said. Counsel, stick to the settlement terms. Rachel adjusted her approach. We request a more equitable distribution, considering my client's cooperation. His cooperation came only after he was caught. I interrupted, and only after attempting to intimidate witnesses. The judge held up her hand. I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, I'm approving the settlement as structured. Mr. Sutton, please rise. Adrian stood on shaky legs. The civil penalties in this case will be addressed separately from your criminal sentencing next week. She continued. But let me be clear. Your attempts to blame family dynamics for your criminal behavior are not persuasive. Your Honor, Rachel started. No. The judge's voice was firm. The evidence is overwhelming. The settlement stands. She banged her gavel. Court adjourned. As people began filing out, Adrian turned to me. Happy now? No, I replied honestly. But it's done. Mom approached, her face tight with anger. I hope you're satisfied destroying your brother's life for some petty revenge. Mom, Adrian's voice was tired. Stop. She didn't destroy anything. I did this to myself. The admissions seemed to shock her into silence. Reese appeared at my elbow. SEC wants to talk to us about Thompson's involvement. I nodded, gathering my files. As I turned to leave, Adrian called after me. Hey sis. His voice cracked slightly. Remember when we were kids and you wanted to be a superhero? What about it? You said you wanted to fight for justice. He smiled sadly. Guess you got your wish. I watched as the bailiff led him away, Mom trailing behind them, still clutching her handbag. The courtroom emptied until only Reese and I remained. You okay? She asked. Ask me after his criminal sentencing next week. I straightened my jacket. Right now, we have more work to do. We walked out together, leaving behind the echoes of family bonds, broken and reformed in the pursuit of justice. Sometimes I realized being a hero meant making the hardest choices even when they hurt the ones we love. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Adrian sat across from me in his beige jumpsuit looking smaller than I remembered. 3 years into his 5-year sentence, this was only our second visit. You cut your hair, he said by way of greeting. You grew a beard. I gestured to his face. It suits you. Not much choice in here. He fidgeted with his sleeve. Thanks for coming, I wasn't sure you would. Your letter was convincing. He nodded, glancing around the room where other inmates visited with family. Mom finally stopped sending money to my commissary account. I know, she called me about it. Really? His eyebrows shot up. You two are talking again? We had lunch last week. I smiled slightly. She admitted she might have been wrong about a few things. Adrian leaned forward, lowering his voice. Is it true what I heard about Jesus Thompson, 15 years? 17. Turns out, he was running schemes with half a dozen other clients. Your cooperation helped bring that to light. Karma's a bitch, he muttered, then caught himself. Sorry. I'm trying to be better about everything. The prison therapist you mentioned in your letter, she's helping? Dr. Chen. He nodded. She's the one who suggested I reach out to you, said I needed to stop blaming others for my choices. A guard walked past, and we fell silent until he passed. I saw your name in the paper, Adrian said. That big civil rights case you won? You're following my cases? Every one I can find. He smiled weakly. Turns out the prison library gets all the major papers. I've become quite the legal scholar. Better late than never. Yeah. He rubbed his face. Listen, I've been practicing what to say to you for months. Can I just... I nodded. I was jealous, he said simply. Not just of your success, but of your integrity. You knew who you were, what you stood for. I was so busy trying to look successful that I forgot to actually be good at anything real. Adrian, let me finish. He held up a hand. What I did was wrong. Not just the fraud, but how I treated you all those years of putting you down, making you feel small. I did it because I felt small, and I'm sorry. The words hung between us, heavy with decades of history. Natasha got remarried. I said finally, I know, to that kindergarten teacher. He smiled genuinely. Good for her, she deserves to be happy. A bell rang, signaling the end of visiting hours. Before you go, Adrian said quickly, I have something for you. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Made it in the woodshop here. It was a carefully drawn blueprint for a bicycle. The same model I'd learned to ride on after he pushed me off. Thought maybe. He hesitated. Maybe when I get out I could build one for your kid. I stared at him. How did you know I was? Mom mentioned you've been sick in the mornings. He shrugged. I can do math, I haven't told anyone at work yet. Secret safe with me. He stood as the guard approached. For what it's worth, you're going to be an amazing mother. You always were better at taking care of people than I was. I tucked the blueprint into my bag. You know, they have a law library here, yeah? Could always use some pro bono help with research if you're interested. His face lit up. Really? You said you're following my cases, might as well make yourself useful. The guard cleared his throat. Time's up. Adrian nodded. Thank you for coming, for listening, for everything. That's what big sisters do. No, he said seriously. That's what good people do. I'm just sorry it took me so long to see that. As I gathered my things, he called after me. Hey, Eliana. Yeah? When the baby comes, will you tell them about me? I turned back. I'll tell them their uncle is learning to be brave enough to face the truth. That sometimes the hardest victories are the ones we win over ourselves. Still talking like a lawyer, he smiled. Still your sister, I replied. Walking out of the prison, I placed a hand on my stomach, thinking about cycles breaking and new beginnings. My phone buzzed, Braden reminding me about tomorrow's deposition. The world of justice and consequences continued turning, but something had shifted, like a broken bone finally setting right. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Sometimes that's enough of a victory to build a future on. I took one last look at the prison before getting in my car. The blueprint in my bag felt like a promise, not of perfection, but of possibility. Sometimes that's all any of us can ask for. That, and the courage to keep pedaling forward, no matter how many times we fall.